In the summer of 1912, the 22-year-old Paul Nash felt inspired to draw these towering hills in Oxfordshire. Alone, Nash would walk the hills, called the Wittenham Clumps. For him, they were the birthplace of his art, a place of magic and inspiration. Nash called them the pyramids of his small world. Nash was just setting out on his restless journey as an artist, brilliantly original, yet also enigmatic. He'd come back here right at the end of his life to immerse himself in his own English paradise and say his goodbyes to the world with some of the most lyrical paintings of the 20th century. But it wasn't Nash's destiny to be a painter only of pastoral landscapes. World War I transformed the landscape of Belgium and France and scarred Nash's soul forever. He painted its muddy, bloody abyss, brooded on its dead, and never forgot them. Nash was a brilliant artist of a very English kind. Strong feelings are expressed, but with a certain reserve. After the living nightmare of war, he'd paint life in peacetime as a waking dream, thronged with disconcerting images. He would rarely paint the people he knew, and never paint himself. Only ghosts inhabit his world, the paths they walked, the damage they've wrought, the trails they've left. I want to follow his trail, walk in his footsteps, and find out, if I can, what inspired Paul Nash and what haunted him. Paul Nash's love of nature began during his childhood. When he was 11, his family came here to Ivor Heath in Buckinghamshire. They'd moved from London to help Nash's mother, who suffered from mental illness. Nash wrote in later life about how his mother's sickness cast a shadow over his childhood. But from the bottom of the garden, he and his brother and sister would escape to play in the woods beyond. These woods near the family home at Ivor Heath were his playground. He used to come here with his younger brother John and his much younger sister Barbara. Paul often used to carry Barbara on his shoulders, and between them they turned this place into a kind of swallows and Amazons paradise. Paul gave these woods a nickname. He called them Hawkswood, after the birds of prey that hover overhead. And I think it's a revealing choice of name because, after all, he was himself something of a hawk. Rather aloof, rather solitary, someone who lived through his eyes. And I wonder if it wasn't here during his childhood that he acquired his lifelong habit of relating more easily to nature, to the landscape, to trees, to birds than to people. I think here, more than anywhere else, he truly felt able to breathe. On leaving school, instead of joining the Navy as his mother wanted, Nash got a job with a firm of book illustrators and went to art classes by night. Angel and Devil, a drawing of 1910, has a nightmare feel about it. It's like a moonlit vision of Hawk's Wood, where he played as a boy. But here, the hawk is a winged devil attempting to snare its victim. Later that year, Nash's mother died. He was 21 years old. Nash continued to visit his widowed father at the family home. The two shared a close relationship, even closer now with the loss of Nash's mother. In the sunny warmth of the morning room, Nash developed his work as a burgeoning artist by sketching the natural world outside. It's fascinating to me to see this beautiful early drawing, simply called Tree, in the very house, Wood Lane House, where I'm sure he created it. The view is as if from that window. Those elm trees once stood in that gap. They all died from Dutch elm disease in the 1970s, but here they are in Nash's work. And it's very much, I think, an image of nature seen from the confines of a garden. He tells us what time of year it is. Little daffodil in the foreground. These squadrons of swallows flying in tight formation. It's spring. It's a picture full of a sense of air, breath. There's a lot of sky in it. The trees seem to reach up towards that sky. And it could have been a picture of nothing at all, just a view from his window, but he's somehow managed to infuse it with a sense of idealism, dare I say, spirituality. It's as if those trees aren't just growing, they're aspiring, they're breathing in the air. Where did Nash get his style from? This dense cross-hatching, this elaborate working of detail conjures up the fairy tale mood of late 19th century book illustration. Nash wants to create an image that is simultaneously a depiction of what he sees from his house, but he wants to give it a kind of spiritual lift. He wants to express to us the way in which he experiences nature as a kind of vision. There's a lot of idealism to this image. With the encouragement of his father, Nash moved to London after winning a place at the highly selective Slade School of Art. Nash's class, as seen here in a group photograph, included some of the great young artists of the day: Stanley Spencer, David Bomberg, C.R.W. Nevinson. But Nash felt he didn't fit in. He didn't even turn up for the photograph. In later years, he recalled being deeply wounded by head tutor Henry Tonks, who criticised him for his inability to draw the human figure. It was then that Nash decided to make nature his art school. He walked the countryside alone, searching for what he called the genius loci, the spirit of the place. Instead of the life class, with its carefully posed nudes, he studied the Whittenham clumps in Oxfordshire. Instead of artists' models, he depicted trees. And human figures, when they do appear in his work, seem like ghosts. Nash was a self-made artist, and he was his own impresario too, organising his first exhibition at a London gallery in 1912. Landscapes, of course, in watercolour and pen and ink. A great success. But Nash didn't avoid the life class altogether. He had friends who were painters, and one day in 1913, while visiting their studios as they were sketching the female models, his eye was caught by a young lady called Margaret O'Dur. Margaret was a worker for women's rights, an Oxford graduate, and the daughter of an Egyptian cleric. Nash found Margaret and her beautiful brown eyes singularly lovely and elusive. Margaret found the good-looking and charming Nash hard to resist. The following year, the couple married. Life was going very well for Paul Nash. Then, his world began to fall apart. 1914, the outbreak of the First World War. Nash signed up. At first, he served in the Artists' Rifles, traditional regiment of choice for painters and sculptors. But the duties involved home service only. Tired of endless training exercises, Nash was determined to see action. So he transferred to the Hampshire Regiment. In May 1917, he was sent to Ypres, to the front, where he encountered a world unlike any he'd known. As a sensitive, rather bookwormish boy, Paul Nash had developed a great taste for the absurd classics of English literature. Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland, Edward Lear's nonsense poetry. And I think when he came to the front, to him it was as if he'd suddenly stepped into one of those absurdist worlds of the imagination, except here it was all actually happening. Imagine a world where men had to live in holes burrowed underground, where they had to spend most of their days not in cities, not in houses, but in these strange metal scars cut into the landscape. How very strange, how sinister. Nash had armed himself with pen and paper as well as his rifle, and as the war went on, he'd become increasingly fascinated by this half-buried world, peopled by anxious young soldiers, smoking, waiting to go over the top. There's a sense of anticipation in many of his war sketches from 1917 to 18, of something terrible about to happen. It was. But Nash wouldn't be there to see it, at least not during his first spell at the front. On the 25th of May 1917, so focused on his drawing that he didn't watch his footing, Nash tripped into a trench, breaking his ribs. A comical self-inflicted injury, which meant that he escaped the tragedy about to befall his regiment. Nash was stretchered back to England. Just a few days later, the first shots were fired in the Battle of Passchendaele. The most terrible battle of the war. 4 months long, 200,000 British dead or wounded, Nash's regiment wiped out. Tellingly, perhaps, he never spoke about his dead comrades later in life. Perhaps he had no words. But he did paint a picture during his convalescence in Gloucestershire. The cherry orchard, July 1917. But these are winter trees, lined up like crosses in a cemetery, death in life. Swallows swoop unnaturally low, or maybe they're snagged in the mesh of the barbed wire fence. It's ambiguous. Was Nash counting himself lucky, or was he counting the cost? What we do know for sure is that he became obsessed with returning to the trenches, not as a soldier, but as an official war artist. And in late 1917, after months of petitioning the Foreign Office, the artist finally got his commission. Why did Nash choose to paint rather than fight? Because he was on a private mission. He wanted to honour the ghosts of the dead, to tell the truth about the horror that had done for them. In doing so, he was about to invent a completely new kind of war art. Paul Nash was a very unusual war artist in the sense that he didn't see war as horror, terror, bombs going off, bodies being shattered. He saw war primarily as a terribly artificial, awfully unnatural dislocation of landscape. It created this network of tunnels formed from corrugated iron in which men were forced to live. And then when they emerged from those tunnels, after the battle was over, that was Nash's subject, the aftermath. What did they see? They saw a landscape cratered, ruined, devastated, full of cinder-black trees sticking up like outraged exclamation marks. A landscape of nightmare, but a nightmare that had come true.